One thing that we often forget when we're trying to learn about gardening over the internet is that we're all working with very different circumstances. And what works for one person may not work for another. We're all pretty aware that we all have different hardiness zones, different temperatures that we're dealing with. But one thing that we often forget is we have differences in our soil. So I'm putting a link to the soil maps in the description box so that you can look and see what you have, because it could take you years to figure this out on your own, and it could save you a lot of time and heartache. Uh, they have it broken down into all different categories. For example, here they show the pH differences of the soils in our country. The East Coast tends to be more of an acid soil, where the West Coast is more alkaline. And your soil pH is very important, because if the pH is off, it can lock up the nutrients so that they're not available to your plants. So that's something that you need to be careful of. And like I said, there isn't a one-size-fits-all situation for gardening. One example is raised bed gardening. A lot of people have the idea that everybody could have a wonderful garden if they just use raised beds, whereas that could be detrimental to someone that doesn't have a lot of rainfall. It could work out extremely well for someone like me, because I have a lot of rainfall and my soil needs to be drained. But if you're not getting a lot of rain, and if you look around and farmers are planting in furrows rather than raised rows, then raised bed gardening may not be the best option for you. You might need to keep your plantings low to the ground in order to keep them watered well. And these maps can point that out for you. I'm in Southeastern Virginia, and according to these maps, I have an acid soil, so I have to be very careful about adding any more acid to my soil. And I also have wetland soil with nutrient poor clay. Like I said, the raised bed gardening is to my advantage because I need the drainage, and I have a clay soil that compacts very easily, which will deprive the roots of the air that they need. So let's take for another example the back to Eden garden method, which is another thing that people have the impression that it's one size fits all. Well, if I pile wood chips on my garden, it would tend to add more acid to my soil, which I don't need, and the weight of that mulch would compact my soil, making the situation even worse. And it would also hold in more moisture, which I don't need. So like I say, there is not a one-size-fits-all situation when it comes to gardening, so you need to tread very carefully when it comes to these type of things. And these maps can help you determine which methods would be best for you. I also have very poorly drained soil. And I also have a considerable amount of rainfall. Like I said, the raised bed works fine because I have plenty of rain, too much rain, whereas people out west don't have all of that rain, and the raised beds may be a problem. And you could avoid a lot of that if you kept your crops lower to the ground. So I thought that I would point that out, and like I said, if you could look at these maps and determine what you have, and I also point out that the man that has so much success with that Back to Eden garden, he lives in Washington State. I don't know exactly where, but there are a lot of unique characteristics to his soil that much of the country doesn't have. For example, he has volcanic soil. Volcanic soil is very rich in minerals, and because of that, he wouldn't have to add nutrients like I do. If you live in rocky areas, those rocks provide minerals. I don't have a rock within hundreds of miles of me. So here, I'll put a link to these maps in the description box, and I hope it helps.